Hey guys, this is Dr. Brand. Welcome to the final recorded lecture on the final PESTLE component. This lecture is on Chapter 12, the Ecological Environment, or sometimes called the environmental component of PESTLE. The ecological environment is the second E in PESTLE. This chapter emphasizes the ecological impacts of business activity. Let's begin with the ecological problem in the context of business. So the problem is simple. Businesses need to extract resources from the earth for production. But if businesses exploit the sources of these materials without replacing them, then we face a long-term problem of resource depletion. Not all resources are renewable or can be replaced. For example, fossil fuels. Adding to the problem is the historical tendency for business to value profit over the environment. As we discussed in Chapter 5 in relation to corporate social responsibility, as a result, we are experiencing global climate change, deforestation, problems with air quality from pollution, as illustrated in opening case and the video on China's smog, problems with our water, plants, wildlife, food supply, etc. This is an extremely hot topic in business and beyond. Next, we will discuss this problem from an economic approach. From an economic point of view, there is conflict between our rational desire to increase our incomes and our ability to increase our quality of life. While free markets tend to be good for both business and consumers, there are dangers of market failure. One big market failure is the fact that these benefits for both businesses and consumers are at the expense of our environment, which is a huge social cost. In general, the businesses and consumers benefiting are not paying for this social cost. For example, do you pay a fee for polluting the environment every time you drive? One way to correct this environmental market failure is to devise mechanisms and regulations that provide a way for those who benefit from it to pay the environmental costs, which in theory would be invested in measures to clean up the environment or compensate those affected. It might also have the effect of discouraging environmentally damaging behavior. Of course, how to actually do this is a challenge. Even so, this still does not prevent environmentally damaging behavior, and critics argue that we simply should not cause the harmful effects in the first place. Of course, this would require huge changes and sacrifices. While the ecological problem has this negative externality of market failure is generally accepted, how to deal with the problem is widely debated. Unfortunately, even though this problem is identified and accepted as a problem, all too often it's business as usual. Although there is a business case for going green, as we learned in Chapter 5, many firms resist making changes to preserve their profits or will only do it if there are the right incentives involved. Fortunately, there is growing awareness of the problem with the help of several pressure groups such as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. All right, let's now get into the perspectives on the role of business. A lot of this comes down to the question, what is the role of business? In essence, business activity is the conversion of natural resources into goods and services to satisfy the needs, wants, and desires of human beings. While this generates economic growth, it also creates environmental problems. There are competing perspectives about how businesses should respond to their environmental challenges. Some emphasize the free market and believe businesses should be able to operate in markets free from government regulations. While this will likely drive economic progress, it is also likely to be at the expense of the environment. So there is a trade-off between living standards and the environment. They also view business playing a role in developing environmentally friendly technologies and being charged for the environmental damage according to the polluter pays principle. However, others see that as businesses just being interested in maximizing profit and treating the environment as a free sink for pollution. They don't think this is right, even if the businesses pay for their environmental damage. Additionally, there are issues of income inequity. The distribution of income and wealth that results from free markets is highly unequal, where more developed countries and richer members of society get to enjoy the fruits of economic growth, whereas the poor lose out and only experience the associated environmental problems. In short, it is clear that businesses have a big role to play. Business needs to focus on their roles as sustainable businesses and not just in relation to the bottom line of profit, but also in their impact on people and the environment. There are also green views. In fact, there are many different green views, which has created a hindrance for the green movement. However, in general, they all agree that our lives would be improved by not abusing nature and recognizing that we need to alter the prevailing economic model of growth by accounting for environmental costs. However, for this to actually happen, there would need to be the development of a new form of ecological consciousness and corresponding changes in the way in which environmental policy is enacted. This takes us into our next topic, environmental regulation. The Industrial Revolution made damage to the environment from business very apparent. So in the 20th century, it became accepted that business activity needed to be regulated in order to protect the natural environment. Environmental regulation has been viewed as the responsibility of national governments. However, as we've seen with globalization, it is clear that not all countries have the same levels of governance. This means that trade is not a fair game between nations due to different levels of environmental standards. Consequently, there has been a push for common international environmental standards, but this has been very difficult. It also leads to claims of double standards. Developing countries will point to the developed world's hypocrisy in insisting on levels of environmental protection that they themselves did not have to deal with as they were developing, and claim that this is simply being used as an artificial restraint on trade and economic development. On the other side, developed countries claim the lower environmental standards give developing countries an unfair advantage in relation to trade. And then there are also accusations that MNEs are able to exploit their ability to work across borders to behave in irresponsible ways. Regardless, binding environmental legislation is only possible at the international level if nations agree to it. One such attempt has been the UN Global Compact, which attempts to provide a framework for issues concerning the environment, among other issues. This compact emphasizes that there does not need to be conflict between saving the environment and business success. For example, if businesses um, don't take action now to reduce their environmental impact, their profits will suffer in the future. This short-term action is seen as an investment to prevent longer-term costs. A big part of the solution to the ecological problem is global cooperation. What is the point of one country or region having stringent environmental safeguards if others do not, since ecological systems overlap? Environmental problems transcend boundaries. Thus, national policies alone are not sufficient and can put businesses at a competitive disadvantage if such policies are not universally applied. Instead, there needs to be concerted action at the global level. Global cooperation in this matter has been a huge topic in international relations. One attempt is the Paris Agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It was signed in 2016 by all 189 members. Under the Paris Agreement, each country must determine, plan, and make regular reports on the contribution that it undertakes to mitigate global warming. In 2017, the US received a ton of global backlash when President Trump announced his intention to withdraw the US from the agreement. Regardless, even with global cooperation, environmental policy needs to deal with resistance from both producers and consumers and persuade all that the long-term benefits of preventing environmental damage are greater than the cost of taking action now to minimize it. And here are some important variables in the ecological environment for firms to consider. We have climate and weather, pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, decline of raw materials, promoting positive business ethics and sustainability, reduction of carbon footprint, environmental legislation, geographic location and accessibility, global warming, water shortages, rising sea levels, energy consumption, recycling, waste disposal standards, environmental standards, and involvement in global pacts. And just like the other PESTLE components, there are other variables too, and the ecological variables a firm should pay close attention to in the ecological environment depends on the country and industry of interest. So, in conclusion, it's evident that there are obstacles to environmental policies. Businesses have to balance the risk of incurring costs of environmental compliance with the risk of doing nothing. Furthermore, international businesses need to understand national differences in environmental regulations. For businesses with the short-term goal of maximizing shareholder value, it is all too easy to maintain the business as usual mindset, but the increasing recognition of global environmental problems means that this is not a realistic possibility. While progress is being made, it is clear that it's still not enough. And so that concludes the series of recorded lectures in this course. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for listening to all of these, and I really do hope that you found them helpful. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.